I like the second one better. Okay. Chairman Mike McCoo, Wellington Board of Finance meeting of January 21st, 2021, called to order at 7:04 p.m. We have all regular members present, so we do not need to see alternates. First order of business on the agenda is approval of minutes. I'll make a motion to get the discussion started that we approve the minutes of.
Second.
What is the date again? I'm sorry, I just lost it on my screen here. Somewhere.
January 14th.
Thank you. January 14th.
I'll second.
I just had a couple things I wanted to clarify for the minutes. I said this to Marissa, but just that I just wanted to clarify maybe for the minutes for this meeting that I don't have the, I've removed the conflict for attending the budget hearing on April 6th, but I still understand it's an issue if, it's still an issue that there's so many meetings on Tuesdays that are in the home stretch of the budget process. So, but I do understand the issues and I just moved some stuff. So that was in, that was, yes.
All right, so that the minutes were accurate at the time. So
okay.
I think that's a great discussion point for later for tonight.
Okay.
But the minutes were accurate at the time, so I think we should leave that as is. And we're all about the wrong meeting, I think.
And what?
I think we're talking about the wrong meeting. We said January 14th, which was last meeting.
Oh, is it before that?
Well, at the last meeting, Jim brought up the issue that he strongly believed that people should be able. So I think either one fits under.
That's what I was talking about, the present to speak.
Okay, understood. Sorry, I misunderstood what you were.
Yeah, and then the other one's a real simple one at the bottom of page 5, last line. Just make health read healthy. Healthy fiscal plan. Tiny, only one letter.
Okay, and that was on the January 14th?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Any other additions, corrections, comments? All right, Marissa, why don't you give us a vote, call a vote, please?
Matt?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Steph?
Yes.
Christina?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and then do we have minutes from December? I'm trying to go back on my calendar here.
December 17th.
Thank you, December 17th. Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from December 17th. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, discussion on those minutes. Seeing none, Marissa, call the vote, please.
Pete?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Steph?
Yes.
Christina?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Present to speak. Public participation is desired and encouraged. Speakers will be limited to time and appropriateness of comments to maintain progress, stay on topic, and maintain decorum. So anyone who has a video screen showing right now, has their camera on, wave your hand. Jim Bulick, why don't you start?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just was informed by our town clerk this week that Mike Perrig is no longer resident of Wellington. So we are resubmitting our nomination for Brenda Abrams as alternate on the Board of Finance until the next election. Brenda has at least a lot of experience in the town and has participated actively. She also ran for Board of Ed just recently in the past election. I think she will make an excellent candidate. She works in the healthcare industry. She sends her regrets this evening. She just got her second COVID shot and is having some adverse reactions to that. He's trying to recover from that. So I can't speak highly enough for Brenda. I think she'll be an excellent candidate, and she lives in Wellington. Again, Jim Bulick, 12 Laurel Drive. I don't know if I got my address in there. Just want to, for the record.
You didn't. And also, are you speaking as a citizen, or are you representing, for those who don't know, you are representing an organization?
I am speaking on behalf of the Wellington Republican Town Committee.
Thank you. I saw Peter Latinchich waving his hand.
Peter Latinchich, 97 Trask Road, Wellington resident, 30 plus years, former member of the Board of Finance, Planning and Zoning, Board of Education, and CIP. A couple of points I want to address tonight, if I may. The first, I also would like to speak on behalf of supporting Brenda Abrams to join the board. I think it's important to have a full board for the budget process, and she's an outstanding candidate with a keen interest in Wellington's public life. So I hope you'll act quickly. Secondly, I'd like to comment on last week's meeting and ask a question. I was very pleased to see the board come together and issue a budget guideline letter to the budget groups. Just wanted to ask if the letter went out to both the town and education budget groups, and is that process acknowledged by them and in place? And lastly, a question I've asked in the past, what is the status of school roofs, CIP project, and is there a schedule now in place to be ready for the spring when the students vacate? Thank you.
I will comment on a couple of those items just because I think it'd be good to clarify. The letter was sent the morning after the last meeting. So on Friday the 15th, the budget guidance letter was sent to all of the normal submitting groups. I have not particularly had any response directly to me as board chairman, but that is typical. I don't typically get response back from them. So we're under the assumption that things are normal and people have read the letter and are going to respond to that guidance. And on the school roofs, I have no official information, although I did hear anecdotally that it is being prepared. That project is being prepared for this summer.
Thank you.
Anyone else who is on video, wave your hand if you would like to be recognized for present to speak. All right, I don't see any others. Anyone else who does not have their video camera on but would like to speak, please unmute yourself and call out your name. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to new business. Normally we do old business first, but we had a request to move a couple things to the beginning, which is why the agenda is constructed this way tonight. And we have some people who have conflicts with multiple meetings. And so item number one in new business is the South Wellington Lot SIP design funding. And that is Mike D'Amato and Erica.
Thank you. So we wanted to talk with you tonight about a request for funding for design monies for a project that's going on in South Wellington, where we have been awarded a lot SIP grant, and the total amount of the grant is just under $1 million. I think when we applied, it was like 99999. And so part of there were no matching funds, but the design was not covered as part of the grant. And so the total design costs we're looking at are $22,000. And so while we put in a CIP request, there's a possibility we'd need the funding before the budget would pass and before July 1, so that we don't risk losing the dollars for this lot SIP project. So with that, Mike D'Amato is leading the way in this project, so I'll let him speak to it.
Yeah, so Erica summed it up pretty well, and I just want to back up and say I appreciate you accommodating me. I'm unfortunately double booked, but the The project was one of a handful of projects statewide that was approved. It is basically pedestrian and safety improvements in South Willington, from the school basically working almost to the mill to match with the some of the sidewalks that are already there. It will be ADA accessibility improvements, sidewalk reconstruction and installation. It will involve the addition of pedestrian islands and rapid flashing beacons in front of the school, and fixing the fact that there is no ADA accessibility between the school and the parking lot. The intersection that is there on Penny Hill and the entrance to the parking lot is inadequate and unsafe. And so the grant will fund all of that construction. But as Erica said, it doesn't cover the design. We have been given the approval. CROG has given us that. It was shortlisted and we got the award, but we need to get a, basically we need to turn around the plans and get everything squared away with DOT, so they will give us a commitment to fund, which is them telling us we have this money set aside for you. And then we have some flexibility as far as project execution to make sure we're not trying to do this while the school is in session. But we can't necessarily afford to wait until the CIP plan is approved in May to then try to amend the plans and get everything squared away and then ask DOT to do this commitment to fund. You know, there are probably quadruple the projects that applied that were granted the money. And so they need to know if we're going to be able to do this or not, because they'd like to award to another town if we're not going to be able to hold up the design costs. The one thing that I will note is that I was able to obtain survey data from DOT, which has reduced our design costs because we were able to incorporate them into the plans. So some of the survey work that will need to be done, we actually won't have to do. So that has taken probably almost $10,000 off of the cost that I would have been asking you for. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions that you might have. But the next step for this, after we get this taken care of, is obviously we would bid the survey work and go through the town's procurement process. But we're hoping to get a jump on this so that we can not have to push this out multiple school years, you know, for summer construction.
Okay, thank you. Just a question on this. I feel like there are ghosts of projects past that this reminds me of. Does this go back to, in some sense, back to when Christina was first select woman and we were talking about sidewalks in the village?
A little bit, but this project doesn't include, it connects to the existing sidewalk. So it will go from the school up to almost to the mills. So what it doesn't do with the dollars that we were allowed, fix the existing sidewalks that were in front of the mills. We were hoping that that would be the case, but that it's possible. I know Mike and I have talked about it, and we mentioned this at CIP, that there may be a possibility when the project comes in that there may be additional savings or dollars, and then we could, you know, kind of submit a change to our project and do those sidewalks. But this really goes up to, is it Village Street?
Yeah, it's that last street there before you get to the mill. It connects to the sidewalks that are, I think, on the opposite side of that street. But the grant application was submitted just this past summer, and it was shortlisted in the fall, and we received the award probably in October. So there are only certain projects that are eligible because it requires them to be located on certain roads, and the T in LOTSIP is for transportation. So it has to be specifically tied to that type of infrastructure. So it can't go to other town improvements, fields and parks and those types of things. And the other reason why this is sort of important is because the DOT has said that they have some other work that they're going to do, or they want to do in the area of the school, but they're not going to do it, obviously, if we're going to have this grant funded project, because this goes way beyond what they would do. If I don't tell them where we are with this grant, they're going to scrap their project because they need to get it into design. So I don't want to lose both. they have identified some safety concerns in the area of the school. But if they don't have an answer pretty quickly, they're not going to have the time to design it, and we'll be without anything. So that's why we kind of felt it was appropriate to come to you now.
Okay, so my follow-up question then is, there were a lot of sort of legalities discussed in the past about that. Who would own the sidewalks? Who would be responsible for them? Does the town own the sidewalks, but they're on a state road? Things like that. And I know some of that was when we were talking about fixing the existing sidewalks across the street. But has all that stuff sort of been resolved? Who becomes responsible for them? Who becomes responsible for maintaining them and that kind of stuff?
So that conversation hasn't happened. I have heard that discussion has occurred in town previously. And what I would say is the majority of this work is fixing the sidewalks that are there. What is there is broken, cracked, and not wide enough for ADA standards today. So there's not a lot of installation of sidewalk where there's nothing. A lot of it is reconstruction of sidewalks where it's there and fixing some of the cross points. That is something we'll obviously have to figure out when we get into the design and looking at rights of way and what that looks like. But at this point, the requirement from CROG is that we develop concept level plans to a certain specification, which is what we submitted. And we'll then have to procure the surveys, which will show us where those rights of ways specifically are.
Like Mike said, I think as we looked at the project, the installation of new sidewalk would be on around what is already property of the town, and including the school. It was
I think, Christina, maybe you remember this in better detail than I do, but this was a significant problem last time.
Yeah, and we really never got to the point of resolving who the owner was, and basically it sort of boiled down to whoever breaks it buys it. And even though it's already broken, when you break the ground again, it's yours. So that was one of the big concerns, but also, like, who is responsible for maintaining it? So if they put it in, then 10 years from now and there's a crack, or even when there's a snowstorm and it needs to be shoveled, is it the property owners who are adjacent to it, or is it the town? I know the school lot, the school takes care of, the school's sidewalks, the school takes care of, but what would happen on the back roads there, or even on Route 32? How does that work?
That's actually why, if I remember right, the sidewalk along the front of Hall School going southbound was actually removed because of this reason, because no one could agree who was going to fix it or plow it. And so it got removed.
Yep.
I don't want to be a downer about this project at all. I think it's a great project. I just remember there were some real challenges here, and I want to make sure they're on your radar.
Yeah, it's certainly something we'll have to a bridge we'll have to cross. One of the things that we will absolutely have to do as part of the grant when we get to that point is public outreach. We're not going to make sure that, these people are not going to find out about it because they see a backhoe. We will do some outreach and make sure that they're aware of what we're doing, why we're doing it, that there have been safety concerns and accidents and things going on that make it unsafe for them to walk in the area that they live. So we will have those conversations and make sure that they understand. There are a number of ways to go about it. And there are towns that have ordinances that basically say, we're going to come in and replace the sidewalk, and then it's yours and you have to clean it and fix it. And that's how Weathersfield does it. So
I think we do have an ordinance that says that, if I remember correctly, but we never really had to think about it much because there are no other sidewalks. So.
Yeah.
Well, there is one. My father's house on Old Farms Road has a sidewalk in front of it, but he has to maintain. Yeah.
I only drive by it every day. It does.
Take a look next time when you.
Now I'm gonna.
It's kind of a sidewalk to nowhere, though.
That was some of the discussion with our sidewalks. The sidewalks at Hall School are sidewalks to nowhere. And so that did come up in the conversation. It's important to know, and I think Mike and I said it, but in case we didn't, it's more than just the sidewalks. It's going to add in some, the island in the center of the road, similar to what you've seen around the Talon Green, and to help slow down traffic in and around the area. We know that speeding is a big concern there in front of Hall School.
So Eric and Mike, what you need from us, I assume, is to be ready to make an allocation at an earlier date if it comes to that.
I think what we're looking for is a bit of a gut check here to see what you guys think, because we don't want to proceed with moving the grant forward only to find out that we're not going to be able to get the 22,000 or what we are going to need to design. And so if that's not something that you guys feel is appropriate, then I need to have that conversation with CROG and say, we're going to have to put this on pause, and I'll talk to you in June when I have an approved CIP plan. And if it's there and the money hasn't gone away, then I'd like to move this forward. But I don't know that they're going to want to wait another 6 months. So, that's kind of what at least I think I'm looking for.
Mike, did you say it's about 10,000 off the original 22,000 sought?
Yeah. So because we were able to get the data from DOT, and I sent it to some coworkers of mine and said, can you import this into CAD and take a look at it and see if we can use it? And they could. It has cut down on the amount of work that we'll have to do, because we're not going to just retrace DOT's steps. So yeah, we were thinking we would need closer to 30,000.
So it's not 22 minus 10, it's 32 minus 10.
Yeah, my original request was higher, and then I found out the DOT data was good, and so I was able to revise it and bring it down. So maybe not as much wow factor for you because you haven't seen it on the piece of paper, yeah. But I promise you, it was higher.
I thought it was 20 something. Yeah.
Okay. Mike, which brings me to my next point. I'm a little concerned that this is the first we're hearing of this, that we didn't hear about you applying for it back in June to prepare us. So to be completely charitable, I'm guessing that you didn't bring this to us until you thought that you might get the money, because that wouldn't make sense to come to us until now, when the money might be approved rather than when you applied for it. So we've been running into this quite a bit lately, where people are coming to us at the last minute for money. But I understand why. The other question I have on this is whether I don't want to see us completely avoid the CIP process. I want to see that if this $22,000 is paid, that it goes through the CIP process and it's counted towards a CIP project, so that we don't completely bypass that and add on $22,000 to whatever CIP is planning already. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Can I take that? I understand a little bit about what you're saying there, but your first point, Peter, our full intent was to put this portion of funding into the CIP process. Mm-hmm. We didn't anticipate that we would need the funding or risk losing the project before that. So that was not something that we had anticipated.
That's what I mean. I understand why you're coming to us now.
Right. Which is why it was being prepared for CIP, and we still went that route. But felt that the responsible thing to do to help secure $1 million grant was to come to you and not wait until the entire process went through for that.
I understand that, Erica. I just want to make sure that we're not adding $22,000 to what CIP is already.
So what I'm going to say about that is, I don't know if we're spending dollars in this fiscal year that we can put it in a budget that goes to the voters for next fiscal year. And so I think there's a little bit of a catch-22 there. Donna, correct me if I'm wrong.
CIP is a 5-year program.
$22,000 in this, hold on, Peter. If we spend $22,000 in 21-22, if this board were to secure funding sooner rather than later, and then we ask the residents, our voters, for $22,000 for a project that's already been done and funded, I'm not sure that's the proper way to account for that.
What? I think that's actually what Peter's trying to say.
Right, but he's saying I still want it to go through the CIP so that the dollars are there, but we wouldn't be able to put it in the plan.
Right, but I think we're mixing up between the current fiscal year and next. And the problem, Peter, I think, is that because we don't have a real CIP plan right now, because we got truncated by COVID, there's nothing in years 2 through 5 anyway. So there is no CIP plan currently other than the current fiscal year that we're in right now. So this thing would either get funded by a special allocation in the current fiscal year, which is what they're asking if we feel that might be doable, or it goes into CIP for year 1 of CIP, which would start July 1st, but it has not, of course, been approved yet because CIP is just ongoing right now. Is that a correct summary, Erica?
Yes.
Okay.
And I hear what you're saying, Peter. You don't want us to put another $22,000 into the plan just because you gave it to us now. We would remove this from CIP. Maybe you spent 22,000, CIP approved at 22,000 for another project. That's up to that committee, and send that to the voters.
Or what we could do is just reduce CIP's budget by $22,000.
I think that's a question for the CIP committee. I'm gonna.
The only thing that I would kind of say to that, recognizing that this is not my realm, is that I know everybody that prepares CIP requests does so diligently and plans out those requests on every year. And this is something that came up. This was a grant that we competed for, and it wasn't obviously on our radar. They released these funds, and we did not at all think they were going to. I would hate to see another project that has been following the process get kicked out because I'm trying to bring this money into the town and it wasn't planned, and it just kind of showed up, and we're trying to take advantage of the situation. It will cost the town at least this to replace those sidewalks if we find out they're our responsibility. So maybe a cost that we're going to have to spend one way or another. Thinking of fellow departments in town hall and elsewhere, I know they have their requests and everybody wants more than what gets approved every year. I would not want to feel like I was cutting a line and kicking out another project that was equally as appropriate. That's not my intent, and I'm not at all trying to suggest that this is the most important thing that you'll consider. It's just really a timing thing, and so to that extent, I would sort of suggest you consider not removing another project, only because this is such a special circumstance.
Other board comments or questions?
This is a different track, but I just wondered about the traffic calming part of the project, because seems to me when Tolland redid their area through the green, there was some widening that happened to make that work so that you're not driving like on a go-kart course, and I'm just wondering, is everybody's cool with that on statewide, on the state side, on doing that on 32 in that place? Yeah, I think it's great for the school impact, but I'm just wondering about that.
So yes, as part of this, because this is a project on a state road, the DOT has also had to review the plan before it was stamped by CROG for tentative approval. And so they have reviewed the plan. They had some very minor comments and didn't present any concerns to us. So they have already reviewed the project and are aware of it. And we've incorporated their suggestions into the concept plan.
Okay, I just wondered if it was wide enough, but I guess they know that.
Yeah, I don't have the dimensions off the top of my head.
That's all right. That's all right.
All right, let's get Lisa. Go ahead.
I just have a question. Do you the portion that goes in front of the school, making the accessible, the wheelchair accessible, handicap accessible passway, and then slowing the traffic down with the islands is terrific. Do you have to, does the grant say you have to put the sidewalks up to the mill, or can you just take the portion that's going to improve the speed, reducing the speed in front of the school and the pass for the handicap accessibility?
So I think that, we started in front of the school. What we were looking at also is that the summer camp that happens there walks to the pond and makes use of some of those sidewalks. And so when we started looking at how everything lay together, we really couldn't touch one piece and leave the rest kind of inadequate. I don't know at this point if we could sort of cut the project in half and say, as of actually now we want to, remove a component. There are a number of boxes we need to check for the types of improvements we're going to make for this to qualify. And so pedestrian improvements and safety improvements were one of them. I don't know if that answers your question.
And I think that recreation piece was one of the boxes we had to check off. There were very specific guidelines in order to qualify, because we had thought about some of the big road projects that you've all been hearing about for many years. And those were our first thoughts. And if we could use some of this money towards those, but they didn't qualify under the guidelines. And so we had to check, like Mike said, we had to check off several boxes, and that piece, trying to get it up to Village Street was one of the points.
This will also add a pedestrian protected sort of, they call them area of refuge for people that are crossing in front of the church, so that if they're in the parking lot, right now they're basically in the curb cut and crossing the street. Now this will add a place where they can stand and safely figure out if they have time to cross, and then cross in a crosswalk. And the pedestrian protected islands in front of the school, the purpose of that is because of the speeds, they can sort of cross the road, stop in the middle. If they're elderly, they can rest, figure out if they have safe passage, and keep going. So there is a number of points throughout the context of the project where we are improving the crossing that has to happen because the sidewalks are on both sides, which is why we went there, and we're connecting up with the existing sidewalks that run south from the mill. So we didn't continue to that portion because there are some there that are in decent shape. And we ran out of requests. We've asked for the maximum. We had to reduce it the first time, actually. So we can't fund any more project, unfortunately. I could certainly find a way to do it if they would give me the money, but $1 million was the cap.
Okay. Any more board comments?
I guess you could call this a rhetorical question, but Mike is our zoning agent, correct?
Yes.
So how does this fall under his realm of his job description?
Do you mean how does this apply to zoning?
I'm just kind of curious. We never had
Mike,
we never had a zoning guy do.
No, Mike also has grant writing experience, and he is working with us in that capacity, helping us to secure grants. It was another one of the pluses to contracting the services of, I was going to say CME, CHA, and Mike. We don't have a grant writer, and this really worked to our benefit. And some of this is what Mike does. And then, as you know, here, Jeff, we often all wear many hats, and this fits well into his job description.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is that obviously planning and zoning, placemaking, community building, trying to make South Wellington, a place that is got a village feel. This is something the commission has focused heavily on for a long time, but this was not a me thing. This was a team project. We all sat down and said, hey, we've got this grant application. What will qualify that we want to do? Erica, the superintendent, Parks and Rec, Human Services, and we all got around a table and basically spitballed the criteria to figure out what we could use. So yes, I did the typing, but this was absolutely a team effort, trying to figure out how we could procure funding that from another entity, right, and not have to pay for things ourselves. So I'll take the blame, but I don't want to take the credit.
All right, no, I don't think we need to assign blame. Let's keep moving with our agenda tonight. Board comments?
Dina has her hand up.
Go ahead, Christina.
So the 22,000 is to get to the next step. Is that right? So before the abutters are involved, and even before planning and zoning approval, which I'm guessing they need to weigh in, or
yeah,
no?
I don't think we'll need planning and zoning. Once I get the okay that I say, okay, I know I'll be able to go out to bid for the design, then we'll finalize everything with CROG, get the commitment to fund, and begin. So we would first do the public outreach and bid the design. So we're not going to get the plans ready to go and then start talking to people. We want to be in having that conversation sooner.
So when does the $22,000 get spent in the process then? Like,
after we get everything finalized with CROG, we get the commitment to fund, know we have access to the funding, we'll then actually begin the process. We will do some of the public outreach, and then we will issue an RFP for a firm to design, and that's when we'll spend the money.
But late spring, right, Mike, was the time frame we talked about. We believed it would be just before the window to use CIP funds for next fiscal year. It was pretty close a call, which is why we submitted to both. There's just a risk waiting for CIP.
Matt Clark.
Yeah, when will we break down? When will this actually happen?
We can't hear you, Matt. You're all garbled.
I think I heard him say, when would this break ground? When would this actually happen?
That's exactly right.
So we would get the money to design the project, and based on that time frame, we would have to make sure that this coincided with the summertime. So we were not trying to do this while the school was in session. So it would kind of depend on how long some of that stuff took. This is not going to happen this summer. I don't see us being able to turn all of this around in that much time, because a contractor is going to have to get it on the schedule. So we're probably looking at next summer for construction. So,
and when would the money actually flow to the town?
You mean the money for the whole project or the money for the design work, Matt?
The money for the whole project.
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Yeah, you're very muffled.
So the whole project, I'll fix it. The whole project.
So the design work is anticipated to be spent and done this spring, but because that will take a longer process, that the actual construction what Mike is saying, the construction would begin most likely next summer. It would more likely be ready in the winter time, but they're not going to do it not going to do it at that time. So it would wait until next summer.
And the other thing that I would point out is this does not require the town to front the money. So the funding is available, so we don't need to put $1 million aside. And then I did confirm that with CROG.
Is this any better?
Not
a little,
maybe.
Not really.
So is there a risk though that we could spend the $22,000 on the design and then somebody not approve it, either locally, DOT, the neighbors, and anyone say no, and then we're out the $22,000 and out the $1 million as well?
So once we get the commitment to fund from DOT, then there is no other approvals that are necessary. Planning and zoning doesn't have any jurisdiction over sidewalks or a state road, so there's no involvement there. And the goal is to educate the folks in the area on what we're doing and why these safety improvements are necessary. But because we're not asking to take land, we're not asking for easements. We're not asking to take portions of the property. We're not relocating utility poles. So there's not really any other additional.
Isn't some of it on the back road, the Wellington roads though? Some in the village?
There's no sidewalks are being added on any of those side streets.
Oh, okay. Okay. I thought it went all the way to Hall's Pond.
We would have liked to, but the road was too narrow.
Oh,
right.
And there wasn't too much frontage. So
that
was our first, when we narrowed it down to this project, our design had all kinds of things. And then we quickly realized that didn't fit the boxes of the grant and had to scale back our hopes and dreams. So we get them to a side road where it's safer, and then they're kind of on their own back in the road.
Mm-hmm. Still the ongoing maintenance issue is sort of unresolved, right? That Mike brought up earlier. Mike M. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you as far as the maintenance is concerned.
Right. I mean, the sidewalks are there, they're being repaired. So, this may solidify who owns up to that point sidewalk. If we repair them now, we may have to take ownership. But again, up to that point, it doesn't discuss because we're not going in front of High Chase or the Mills.
Okay. Any more board questions or comments?
Well, that just brought up So, but if these new sidewalks are in, then High Chase and the Mill are definitely going to say, oh yeah, it is the town of Wellington who needs to fix these. And the High Chase one, they have that retaining wall that's like falling in. So I think that's an even bigger project. So I'm just afraid that, but it needs to be fixed by somebody. I mean, it definitely does. It's definitely a hazard, and we need it in front of the school and definitely in front of the church and those other places too, I think. But I'm just saying it's going to be a slippery slope, but it already is. Not slippery anyway. It's a broken slope.
Trippy.
So we
okay, Matt.
So we don't know whether or not we own the property. We don't know whether or not we can use the property. We have a grant for $1 million to make improvements from a school, from the Hall School, past the church, but not into the factory, right? Not that far. We need $22,000 to spend, and we don't break ground until year and a half from now. Is that right? And the money won't be occurring for another year and a half as well. Is that right?
I would say the reason why we don't break ground for a year and a half is because we don't want to have this project ongoing while the school's in session. We don't need a year and a half to make it happen. We don't own the land. The state owns the land. It's within the state's right of way. They've reviewed the plans. So the ownership is not something that comes into play. Okay. We've gotten through their review and approval. They're basically going to give us permission to work within that right of way. So there's no ownership that we need to negotiate with private property owners. Okay. And the money related to the grant will be set aside for this project once we tie up this last piece and get a commitment to fund. These projects can fund things as large as bridge reconstruction. And so there is an understanding that they don't happen in the same fiscal year. So the CROG is comfortable with a longer timeline.
Is there a potential that they would yank it afterwards? Yes, we approve this. Everything's set. We spend the $22,000. We get the plans done. And a year and a half from now, they go, we don't have the money anymore. We can't bond it.
No. My understanding is the money is already available. It's already been set aside. The amount of money they got, they approved for specific projects. And now they're basically going through and issuing those commitment to fund letters, like I said, through DOT. But the money has already been made available and they have access to it.
It's more likely, Matt, we'd lose it if we didn't hold up our end of the agreement. That's where we risk losing the project. So there's really, if we didn't do this part, we're losing out on opportunity to receive the dollars. But in order to get the commitment to fund, we need to commit to the design portion.
And this is not going to come out of CIT. Where's it going to come from then?
So listen, it's up to this board to determine where, but I would say it's up to you to determine where the funds come from outside of the budget process. So that really leaves you the general fund, correct, Donna?
You can nod a yes if you need to.
I think she did. She nodded.
Yeah.
Now that we can see her.
Yes, yeah.
And again, our hope was that this could go through the process, which is why I said to Mike, we're still going to write it up and submit it to CIP. Really didn't think that we'd be under the gun, but it's really risky for us to give up $1 million project.
Okay, so we are almost an hour into this meeting. So for the sake of maintaining agenda, can we get to what action we need to take? I think, Mike, you were just essentially looking for if there was appetite for the project, but that's not an official act by any means.
It's going to take
an actual allocation tonight.
Well, I would love to put a bow on this and be able to go tomorrow and get started on the revisions necessary for the application. It's going to take a fair amount of effort on our part, on my part, to revise and kind of address all those questions. And I don't want to spend that time and work with CROG on that if the board doesn't have an appetite for the design. So I don't need to tell CROG tomorrow, but the sooner we figure out what the board feels about this, the more expeditiously we can move this project forward and get that commitment to fund.
Matt?
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned. You know, we seem to always, maybe I'm new, maybe I don't know what I'm doing, but it seems like every single meeting we get requests for money that are not budgeted, and I hear about it through an agenda that I get the day before. I have no background. It's just a little frustrating. That's all. So. I'll support it. It seems to be the consensus that everyone has that it's a good idea, but you know, it's frustrating. I wish I had known about this before this, and I had some kind of background, you know, that this was going on. That's all.
I will say, Matt, I hear your frustrations and I understand them. So then the Board of Selectmen presented 2 weeks ago to CIP our projects, this was in our list of projects there. So although you don't sit on that committee, it was presented in public 2 weeks ago as part of a project, and stated then that we were going to bring it to the Board of Finance to ask for funding first. But you know, in the meantime, and until something different happened, it's part of our CIP plan.
And what was the reception at CIP? Did that went well?
Well, listen, it's, you know, half of CIP is sitting here at this meeting. And so I think the members had probably some of the same questions they have for us tonight, and some of the same positive and concerned feedback. So
thank you.
You know, they're committing at a different level there. But while I hear what you're saying, we did present it publicly at our CIP presentation.
The only other thing I would add is CROG was almost 2 months late in awarding the money. So we lost 60 days or more because we expected to have this by September 1st and we didn't. So we would have had 2 more months, and this could have happened in a little bit more of an open fashion. So they were late. Big shock.
I understand. There's no question to call, but let's call the question.
Well, actually, so we'd have to go to town meeting for this, right?
Correct.
And in that process I guess I'm just concerned that, I don't know, it would be great if if the people who are supportive of this project would come forward to talk about how they're supportive. So if the people from the school, the people from the church, I'm just curious. I'm guessing that they're supportive of this. I don't know if they even know about it though. So, but that's what a town meeting would be for. So.
Right, and I can tell you that the superintendent is aware that he was in part of that process while we were looking. He's giving you the thumbs up on camera. Part of the discussion when we were looking for a project and when this opportunity came along, and it was a very quick turnaround for a project too. And going through the, you know, here's what you have to fit into, all the categories into this small box. So I can tell you from the school's perspective, the superintendent was on board with us.
It would also be good to hear from economic development at some point, because I know that they've got to focus on the South Village. So
they are aware of this project, and they are working on some stuff with planning and zoning for South Willington Village area, and they are aware of the project. And I talked with them about the application when it was submitted. I talked to planning and zoning about it as well, and they both have been sort of kept up to speed as we've moved through application, and then the fingers crossed for however many months, and then once we got the award.
Okay, Mike D'Amato, does it hurt you if we table this one month?
If that's what it takes, then I'll make it work. If you know, I can work with that. I'll do some homework on my end in the interim. I don't want to, force something. So I'm happy to wait a month if that's what you think it needs.
What funding source would we use? Does Donna have a recommendation?
We'd have to go to general fund, right? That's what we just talked about a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
I took a guess at that. I didn't. I would leave that to Donna.
Donna nodded yes.
She's nodding.
It's really not a lot of money. And I'm just thinking that maybe we could do it through transfers in the general fund budget and, you know, comb through the budget and scrape up $22,000 and make a fund to transfer. You know, we have to look carefully through the budget and see what Erica thinks and what Erica has for some of the favorable line items. Some line items are tracking favorable, and it's possible we could do it through fund transfers.
So and then that the advantage of tabling this till that would give us time to do that in between now and the next meeting.
Yes.
And then we could also possibly get some other supportive information, maybe like people mentioned, if whether it's the church or whatever, that we know that everyone's sort of on board. I mean, I'm inclined to support the project. I think it's a good project, and I think the awarding of the grant is an amazing opportunity to get work that we have been off and on thinking we might be stuck getting done.
So I just want to pose a question a little differently to Mike. Is there any risk at not doing something tonight?
I think that with the potential of what Donna suggested, I think it makes sense for you guys to hold if that gives you an opportunity to look at the most efficient path forward. And if there's any questions that have been raised tonight that I can get succinct answers to in the interim, I will certainly try to do that and provide those to you to the extent that I'm able. And I'll see if we can reach out to, you know, I mean, I think we saw Phil here, the church, to see if they would, you know, formally endorse. I can try to get something from the EDC if that would be helpful to you. But
I think the Hall Foundation with the church is important, especially considering a lot of the other property in the area is Hall Foundation property or formerly Hall property. And the sidewalks actually were probably built by the Halls.
They were.
Therein lies some of the.
I'll make a motion that this item be tabled to the next meeting of the Board of Finance.
I'll second that.
Discussion on the motion.
Can I ask a question? So when you say table to your next meeting, do you mean what you have budget meetings? So you just kind of want to plan time-wise. So if you're asking that you want to hear from feedback from people, when we can tell them that would be.
Sorry, that I hope you'll accept a friendly amendment next regular meeting.
Your next one, I'm sorry?
Regular.
Okay, so that would be the 18th. Okay. If I look at your schedule right, I just want to be sure. Thank you.
Jeff, you accept that friendly amendment?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Marissa?
If we did a transfer, it's unrelated.
So I think we need your support, whether it came from the general fund or a transfer, because you would have to approve the transfer.
Right, but it'd be faster, right? We wouldn't have to go to town.
There would be no town meeting.
So
even though the total would be 22,000 because it would be less than 20 from any one department. Is that it? Or can transfers happen without a town meeting regardless of size? I don't think so. I think we have a $20,000 cap.
$20,000 cap is for additional appropriations.
Oh, okay.
This would be within the budget line item transfers within the budget and not increasing the budget.
Would it be helpful to the board if we came back with some suggestion? I mean, should I have that conversation with Donna between now and then and come back to you with some?
Donna and I will go through the budget.
Okay.
Donna will do that. That's sort of a standard procedure for us.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure if I have any homework, I write it down. Thank you.
And honestly, if we do it this way, it might be faster than going the other way anyway. So, right. In the long run.
Okay. Any more discussion on the motion to table? Marissa, please vote. Call a vote.
Sorry. Matt.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Stephanie.
Yes.
Christina.
Yes.
Pete.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike D'Amato. I'm not sure if we really helped you with your schedule by keeping you until 8 o'clock, but thank you.
And I
Waiting a few
apologize.
extra weeks to potentially save a few extra weeks down the road. I'm happy to wait, and I appreciate your time accommodating me, and look forward to talking again.
Thank you. Next item under new business, also in deference to his schedule for an hour already.
Sorry.
Is Mike Van Deventer of Mahoney Sable with the auditor's presentation.
Okay, well, again, good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Van Deventer, and again, partner at Mahoney Sable, ultimately responsible for overseeing the audit work for the town. Also joining me this evening is Heather Seatman. Heather is a supervisor at the firm and also assisted in the execution of our audit work. So we're happy to be here this evening and present the results of the town's fiscal year 2020 audit. You should have received a presentation that I will run through, and I'm going to share my screen and actually show the presentation. So if you just bear with me 1 second. Okay, can everybody see the presentation?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Okay, so I will ultimately cover the scope of work. I will cover the audit reports that were issued, provide some overall financial highlights. I'll make our required communications. I also included a couple slides on here related to fund balance reserves. We can certainly talk a little bit about that this evening. I know that the board in their November meeting had requested a proposal regarding us to provide some advice regarding fund balance reserves. So we can have some additional discussions on that as well, or depending on your agenda, we could always table that as well. And certainly to the extent you have any questions, my plan will be to kind of pause at the end of each of these sections to give the members time to ask any questions that you may have. In terms of the overall scope of work, again, no changes from prior years. We did an audit of the town's financial statements. We performed that audit in accordance with both the auditing standards issued by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, as well as the government auditing standards issued by the Government Accountability Office. In addition, based on the level of funding that was received by the town, we did also perform a state single audit, and that was performed in accordance with the State Single Audit Act. Again, the town did not meet the threshold requiring for a federal single audit. That threshold is $750,000, and the town had spent approximately $360,000 in federal awards. In addition, we also perform an agreed upon procedures on the end of school year reports that are filed with the State of Connecticut Department of Education. And again, those procedures are required by the Department of Education. In addition to the attest services, we do also perform a couple of non-audit services for the town. Again, we do assist in the preparation of the financial statements as well as the schedule of state financial assistance and related notes. And then we also assist in the conversion of your governmental fund financial statements to your government-wide financial statements. In order for our firm to be able to perform these services and remain independent of the town, management is required to oversee those services and ultimately accept responsibility for them. And again, Donna has accepted responsibility for those services, and we can confirm our independence with respect to the town. In connection with the audit, we do issue a number of reports. Again, the main report is the report on the financial statements. We did issue unmodified clean opinions on your financial statements. Again, our opinion does provide a reasonable assurance that the financial statements have been prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and that they are free from a material misstatement, whether due to error or fraud. So again, there's multiple statements within the financial statements. We do issue separate opinions on each of those statements. For the town, that covers your governmental activities, your utility fund, each of your major funds. So again, your general fund, as well as your capital projects fund, And then we also issue an opinion on what's considered to be the aggregate remaining fund information, and that includes all of your non-major special revenue, your capital projects, your pension trust fund, and your agency funds. So again, a lot of information is being included in these financial statements, and we do express opinion on that information. In addition, we also issue a report on compliance and on internal control over financial reporting. Again, I do want to point out that we do not actually express an opinion on your compliance with laws and regulations. Essentially, during the course of performing the audit, if we become aware of a material non-compliance of a law or regulation, or a significant deficiency or material weakness in your internal control, we're required to include it in this report. And again, we did not report any such matters. In connection with the state single audit, we do issue a report on compliance and an internal control at the state financial assistance level. In this report, we do actually express an opinion on your compliance with your major programs. For fiscal year 2020, the total state financial assistance expended by the town amounted to just over $4 million. The majority of that is considered exempt from our test work. Your major program was the Town Aid Road Grant. Again, we issued an unmodified clean opinion on your compliance over that program. And again, no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses over compliance was reported. I'll pause here and just ask the members if they had any questions regarding the overall scope of work or the audit reports that were issued.
I had a question.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so I received this today. I don't know whether or not I'll have questions. I haven't read any of it. And I received from Donna yesterday the financial statements. So I printed it all out today, and so I probably won't have any questions, but I won't have a chance to prepare either. So thank you.
Yep, that's fine. I think from my perspective, understanding that the members may have not had a chance to actually go through this information. Again, you know, my purpose is report on when you do look at the information, you know, what the results of the audit were. And certainly, if you have any questions as you go through that information, we'd be happy to respond to those at any point in time.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I would say overall for the board, if when people have the opportunity to go through this documentation, I think it would be welcome to bring questions back to the next meeting, and we could compile them and send them to Donna and or to Mike to get those questions answered.
Sure, and I would encourage that. So again, from a board perspective, again, there's a lot of information included in the financial statements, and I would certainly recommend that you do go through those and ask questions as you know, part of your responsibility as members. So this next section goes over our financial highlights. And again, I would include anything in here that would be of concern from a financial perspective. And again, just trying to provide some overall highlights with respect to the results of the fiscal year. Your original budget did provide for the use of fund balance in the amount of $410,000 to balance your revenues and expenditures. Your final budget did include additional appropriations of approximately $240,000 from fund balance. So again, that resulted in a final plan use of fund balance of approximately $650,000. Your actual net change in fund balance was an increase of about $72,000. So again, that resulted in an overall favorable budgetary variance of about $722,000. So again, the way I look at it, you plan to use $650,000, you actually added $72,000. And so how was that, how did that happen? So your revenues were approximately $314,000 more than budgeted. And that was a result of favorable collections on property taxes, as well as education cost sharing funds. And then your overall expenditures were approximately $400,000 less than budgeted. Again, you had expenditures under budget across all departments. I definitely saw budgets being underspent across the board with all the municipalities that we do perform audits of. Obviously, the impact of the pandemic did decrease some of your overall operating costs during that period of time. I do want to point out that the expenditure surplus of 408,000, the education surplus was about 459,000, and so that is reported net of the transfer to the non-lapsing fund of about 174,000. And again, no instances of budgetary non-compliance were identified as a result of our audit work. This next slide goes over your governmental fund financial highlights. So again, this includes your general fund, as well as all of your capital projects and special revenue funds. You did report a combined ending fund balance of approximately 6.4 million. That was an increase of about 184,000 from the prior year. Of that 6.4 million, the majority of that is in your general fund. The general fund reported a fund balance of just over 4.1 million. That was an increase of about 266,000 from your prior year. Of the 4.1 million, 2.6 was considered unassigned, and that does represent approximately 14.9% of your fiscal year 2021 budgetary expenditure appropriations. Your overall capital project fund reported a fund balance of 216,000. Again, that was an increase of about 39,000 from the prior year. And then all of your other funds reported an ending fund balance of just over 2 million, which was a decrease of about 121,000 from the prior year. The majority of those monies are in your reserve for capital non-recurring fund with a fund balance of about 656,000. And then your small city grant housing fund also is reporting a fund balance of about 795,000. Again, the majority of that does consist of outstanding loans, so that money is not available for spending. And again, as part of the audit, we do look for potential deficit fund balances. Again, happy to report that there were no deficits reporting in any of your funds that would require it to be funded from a budgetary perspective. This last section goes over your government-wide financial highlights. Again, the government-wide financial statements do focus on your long-term liabilities. So again, the financial statements are prepared on a full accrual basis of accounting. It does include all of your capital assets as well as any related debt. The town does report a unrestricted net position of about 3.3 million. Again, from my perspective, that is a positive from a financial measurement perspective. The majority of municipalities in the state of Connecticut do report significant deficits in their net position, and that is typically driven by significant unfunded pension and OPEB liabilities. Overall, your governmental activities is reporting an unrestricted net position of about 3.2 million, and your utility fund has a unrestricted net position of about 118,000. Again, contributing to your positive unrestricted net position are your low levels of long-term bond debt. Again, your debt service represented approximately 1.3% of your 2020 budgetary expenditure appropriations, as well as the status of your, the funded status of your pension and OPEB plans. In terms of your net pension liability, so no significant change from prior years. Again, your net pension liability for the town plan totaled about 111,000. That is currently just over 78% funded, and that's utilizing a discount rate of about 7%. So again, typically a well-funded plan is considered anything 80% and above. This is just a kind of a snapshot in time as of June 30. I think the plan historically has been right around that 80% threshold. So again, as long as you continue to make your annual required contributions, the assets should be available to pay those benefits. You also have an other post-employment benefit liability. So that does reflect retiree healthcare benefits for eligible employees of the Board of Education. Again, state law does allow the retirees to access the Board of Education's healthcare plan that is provided to active employees. Although they do pay 100% of the premium of the cost share, there is an implicit benefit that is being received by those employees by having access to the plan. So again, the actuary does perform a calculation to determine or try to quantify the value of those benefits. That totaled about 2.1 million. Again, the town has not established a trust to fund those benefits. You do pay for it on a pay-as-you-go basis. I know we've had discussions in the past. From my perspective, based on the nature of the liability, essentially being an implicit rate, again, I don't think there's a need for the town to necessarily establish a trust and fund those benefits. Before I move on to required communications, again, I know I just kind of covered a lot of information and you may not have had a chance to go through the financial statements. The one thing I will note is, again, we didn't have any significant audit adjustments that would have impacted any of the financial information that would have been provided to you during the course of the year.
Mike, I didn't catch that. That last statement is that you do not see a need to establish a trust to cover those retiree benefits.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of towns that have actually established a trust do offer what I'll call an explicit benefit to a lot of retirees over a long period of time. So again, that's where the town is picking up the cost share for the retiree. In those situations, it certainly makes sense for towns to fund those benefits similarly to the way that you fund your pension plans.
So you had a couple questions. We indicated that there was no deficits in any of our accounts where we spent more than what we intended to spend. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is that normal? Do most towns do that? Are they really, do most towns our size not run into any deficits on any of their accounts?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, that's obviously the controls that you want to have in place. Ideally, if you're going to run a deficit, you would, obtain a funding source for that deficit.
Right. Okay. So I had another question. I think we're getting money in. So I think the federal government is paying us money for some stuff having to do with COVID. At least that's what I remember from last year or earlier this year. How do we account for that? Maybe I don't have to ask you. Maybe I ask Donna. I don't know. But where does that money go?
So Donna, I will let you respond to that only because, from an accounting standpoint, one town may handle it a little bit differently than another town. There's more ways than one to handle it. So I'm not sure, Donna, if you want to just kind of respond in terms of how you're accounting for it.
Sure. So Matt, we are getting money from FEMA and money from the Corona relief funds. And we have talked about it and decided that if the expenditure is incurred and paid for in the same year that the money comes in, then we are going to credit the expenditure. But if the expenditure happened in a prior fiscal year and we're receiving the money in another fiscal year, then we are going to recognize it as revenue.
I think I understand that.
So yeah, the basis for doing that is, essentially these COVID reimbursements should technically be for unbudgeted costs. So to the extent you're incurring those costs this year, by recording an expense credit, you're basically restoring the appropriation that was authorized by the town for that department. But again, from an accounting standpoint, we do some reclassifications to go from your budgetary statements to your GAAP.
Yep.
So again, we would reflect any reimbursement received as revenue on a GAAP basis, but you could utilize it as an expenditure credit from a budgetary perspective.
Last question. I don't know if this is the appropriate time. Are you done with your?
Yeah. So I do have one section left regarding our required communications, but if it financial related, happy to answer them.
Yeah. So we often have situations where we spend money and we shift money in between accounts. And I'm just curious. I mean, I don't know. I've never served on a board of finance before, to tell you the truth, Michael. But So we'll have an issue that we need to take care of. There's an unexpected $120,000 expense. So what we do is we move money around from different accounts. Is that appropriate to do? Is that something that other towns do too? I just don't know.
Yeah, so that is permitted by statute. And again, that does give the Board of Finance the flexibility to manage, the overall budgetary operations for the town. So a very common practice. It's a transparent process. And again, it does give the Board of Finance, control over the budgetary process. And again, that control is typically at the department level. And I know you guys obviously, account for things at a line item level as well. But again, no, movement between funds or between line items and departments is very common in operating a town.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to follow up just real quick, Donna, on that, on the COVID money or the FEMA money and Corona relief. If that comes in as revenue in the next fiscal year, is that going to be sort of separated from the revenue? Will that be? Can you report out how much of it is that versus it getting lumped into typical revenue receipts?
Well, I would probably make an account number for it in the general fund, so that it stands out when you look at the revenue report.
Thanks.
Michael, the Indie-Venter, would you like to finish your presentation?
Sure. So the next section goes over our required communications. And again, these communications are really geared towards when the auditor incurs significant issues during the course of the audit. So these communications are somewhat brief. The first item here talks about our responsibility under our auditing standards. Again, although we do assist in the preparation of the financial statements, they are the responsibility of management. Ultimately, all the information that is included in the financial statements did come from the town. Again, our responsibility is to perform our audit procedures and express an opinion on those statements. In terms of the overall plan, scope, and timing of the audit, again, no changes in the overall scope or the timing of the work that was originally agreed upon. Obviously, we had some added complexities this year with performing the audit remotely, but I am happy to report that all the reports were filed by the December 31st statutory deadline. Just for your information, I know when I signed off on New Year's Eve, I checked the state's website, and just over half of the municipalities in the state of Connecticut actually filed their reports on time. So certainly there were delays, with the process, but I'm happy that we were able to file everything by the deadline. In terms of the significant audit findings, again, we do look at your accounting policies and practices. Just want to point out that, again, there was no new implementation of any accounting standards this year. The GASB did issue a statement number 95 after the pandemic, and that ultimately resulted in a postponement of the effective dates of most GASB standards by at least 1 year in response to the pandemic. So again, that was their way to provide some relief from a financial reporting perspective to governments. I'm happy to report that there were no difficulties encountered in performing the audit. We also had no uncorrected misstatements. So again, if we identified an adjustment that we proposed and management did not want to record, again, we're required to communicate that to you. There were no disagreements with management. We did obtain a management representation letter. There was nothing unique in that representation letter that we would be required to inform you of. And again, we were not aware of any consultations with any other independent accountants. So with that, that does conclude the presentation related to the audit. I know that, again, Donna had reached out and had mentioned that the board was looking for some advice regarding fund balance reserves. So I did prepare a couple of slides on that. But again, depending on your agenda and your time, we could always table that. I guess from my perspective, I just wanted to get a little bit of clarification in terms of what specifically the board would be looking for from a deliverable.
Mike, why don't you, since you have a couple slides, why don't you go ahead and just do those as part of your presentation?
Okay.
We have capital capital as a standing item in our old business. So we could take the information from your slide and we can discuss it during our old business.
Okay. All right. Very good. So again, I just have two quick slides regarding fund balance reserves, and this may or may not address your concerns. Certainly, if you have questions, on fund balance reserves, I'd be happy to answer those. But again, I just wanted to point out, just so everybody, is aware, there are no statutory requirements or accounting rules that will specify the amount of reserves that a municipality should maintain. As a result, typically municipalities will consider the guidance that is provided by certain institutions and rating agencies in order to determine, what an appropriate level of reserve is. Typically, we will reference our clients to the Government Finance Officers Association. So again, that is an organization that was established to assist in the professional management of governments by developing and identifying financial policies and best practices. So if you're looking for, suggestions, recommendations, they have a lot of good information and material that they publish at the GFOA. The GFOA states that it's essential that governments maintain adequate levels of fund balance to mitigate current and future risks. So example would be revenue shortfalls or unanticipated expenditures, and ultimately to ensure stable tax rates. They do recommend at a minimum that general purpose governments, regardless of size, maintain an unrestricted budgetary fund balance of no less than 2 months of your regular general fund operating reserves or your general fund operating expenditures. So you can look at it either way, from a revenue perspective or an expenditure perspective, whatever is typically a little bit more stable from a budgetary process. Typically, my recommendation is to look at expenditures because again, you may use some of your fund balance to offset your increase in your mill rate. So your overall unrestricted budgetary fund balance was about 1.8 months as of June 30th. So again, you're right around that minimum requirement that the GFOA recommends. Again, the GFOA will further state that the adequacy of an unrestricted fund balance should take into account each government's own unique circumstances. So for example, governments that may be vulnerable to natural disasters, more dependent on a volatile revenue source, or potentially subject to reductions in state aid, may need to maintain a higher level of unrestricted fund balance. And so again, I just put together a quick couple bullets here regarding some specific risks to the town of Willington. So when we talk about reliance on state and federal funding, approximately 22% of your 2020 revenues were from state and federal grants, and the majority of that was derived from your education cost sharing funds. So again, any significant decrease in funding from the state would have a significant impact on the town. In terms of property tax concentrations, again, we didn't identify any individual taxpayers that represent more than 10% of the taxes that are levied by the town. So again, no overly significant concentrations. I know you do have some certain taxpayers that are comprise a larger percentage. I think FedEx was approximately 5% of your grand list. But again, so that's something that you would want to consider, but I don't think you're overly exposed in terms of, a concentration on taxes. And then we talk about natural disasters. So, specifically, pandemics, storm cleanups, things that we haven't really had to worry too much about in Connecticut. We're starting to get more tornadoes that run through the state. I had one client that, from a tornado that they had, they had to appropriate from their fund balance about $2 million to assist in the cleanup. Although the majority of that was reimbursed by, the federal government, the town does have to come up with a cash flow to fund those costs up front, because again, FEMA does reimburse on a cost reimbursement basis. So again, these are some of the things that, from a board perspective, you would want to consider when establishing a reserve. And again, from my perspective, you're right at that minimum. And then, you know, from a consideration perspective, I don't really see any significant risks that would suggest that you need to increase it more than the 2-month requirement. But again, that's something for the board to consider. And then one last slide, other considerations. So again, there is some potential impact on your overall town, the bond rating, and any corresponding increase to costs of borrowed funds. Oftentimes to assess the creditworthiness of an issuer, rating agencies will often evaluate your ability to obviously repay your obligations. In doing so, they often concentrate on fiscal and economic performance, monetary stability, and your overall effectiveness of the government. Certainly fund balance is a key factor in the consideration of that rating process. And so the last thing I did point out here was that although you do report an unrestricted fund balance, you certainly can assign portions of that unrestricted fund balance. So again, an assignment isn't a legal, you know, it's not legally limited to any specific purpose, but you could assign a portion of it to, you know, ultimately express your intention for how those funds might be utilized. So to give you an example, you know, you could look at your unassigned fund balance and say, you know, from our perspective, we want to set aside X number of dollars that will be assigned for, you know, emergency management, X number of dollars that are assigned for working capital. Not necessary because it's kind of assumed that that's what that's going to be used for. But if you wanted to get more specific in terms of actually assigning funds for specific purposes, that is something that the board could do. And so with that, that's really all I had in terms of fund balance. So again, I know, you know, you guys were possibly looking for, you know, a specific deliverable. But again, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to, you know, talk you through them now.
Matt, you had a question?
Yeah, so the unrestricted, right now, go back to the slide you were just on, please. The last slide. Thank you. So we can, the governments may report assignments of their unrestricted fund balance. So we could earmark, is what you're saying, monies that are in our fund balance to different purposes, replacement of assets that are aging, investments in programs that are going to be coming due, things that we know are going to happen. Is that right?
Correct. And I'll give you an example. You know, an assignment of your fund balance is you know, use of fund balance to balance your subsequent year's budget. So you basically assign that monies, you know, for a specific purpose. Right. You could do that with other purposes as well. Again, sometimes it could get overly complicated. And I'm not sure, you know, that's necessarily the direction you want to move to, but that is an option that you could consider.
So, yeah, I mean, if we have, like, let's say we identify assets that we know are going to require maintenance, rebuilding, replacement, whatever, we can plan ahead and say, okay, you know, in our fund balance, we think we're going to be using, you know, part of it, X, you know, 3% for this and 4% for that, or a specific funds, and that would be recorded in our financial statements, right?
Correct. That assignment would be shown and specifically disclosed in your financial statements. Yeah. The thing with the capital, again, you know, with an assignment, it would have to be, you know, what is the intention to use that money for? So, you know, typically, I think with the capital stuff, I think you typically will run that through your CIP process. So again, you kind of have to balance any assignments in your general fund with any of your other funds that you also have available.
Okay, any other questions for Mike?
Just from a secretary point of view, Mike, I know last year you brought us like our own copies of this presentation so that I could attach it to the minutes. Would it be possible for me to get, we just didn't get the presentation. We got a couple documents, but I'm just wondering if I can get a copy of the presentation you gave tonight.
Sure, so you want a formal hard copy of the presentation?
Even just in the email or an email so that I can attach it to our PDF.
Donna, is that what you emailed us this afternoon?
Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot to include Marissa.
Thank
All
you.
right, can you just forward that to Marissa?
Yeah, I will.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Michael. We are always happy that you, I'll use the correct terminology, that you presented no concerns. We consider that a positive bill of health. And it's a credit to Donna and her team, of course. And maybe even some of the stuff we do.
It is, and I will just follow up because I know sometimes when you don't report concerns, sometimes board members will think, well, geez, maybe they should have found something. I do just want to point out that, from my experience, with other municipalities, we often have a number of audit adjustments as part of the audit process. May not typically impact your budgetary funds, but again, I think, Donna and her team do a very good job. And certainly they do reach out to us if they have questions regarding, how certain things should be accounted for. So again, all that gets kind of addressed before the audit process.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so we are an hour and a half in and we've gotten through 2 items on the agenda so far. So we're moving now. Item 3 was suspend new business until after old business. So we will now move to old business. Item number 1, public health crisis update. I did spend some time trying to look at the latest information, prepare a couple comments for this meeting. I looked at Department of Labor's information today. Of course, we will probably get the next batch of information tomorrow. That seems to be consistent the Friday after our meetings. But there is, according to the Department of Labor website, jobless rate is still historically high, but dropping over the past week. That's nationwide and in Connecticut. On the Department of Labor website, there is a document called the Department of Labor Connecticut Economic Digest. And that is written by some public finance expert professor and economics professor, not finance. There's some good information to look at there. I did some reviewing of that, and that's kind of concurring with the fact that we are going in a positive direction right now. The divergence between revenue and expense is narrowing, but challenges still lay ahead. I sent a document, a brief update from cost out to all of you. And I did ask Erica to get the latest information, which she was already planning on providing anyway, but on what we're seeing so far in this month on collection and any other economic updates she has. So Erica, why don't you go with that?
Sure, I don't know if you wanted that now or the fiscal year budget. All right, so our revenue collector shared some information this afternoon. To date, we have collected 75.97% of our tax revenues, which is $10,207,634. We are anticipating 1.1 million due from the remaining escrows, and those are due by February 1st. They're not included in the extension. So they're not subject to the extension. They have to pay by then. With those coming in, I would expect us on February 1st, if we got no other dollars, but that escrow payment to have us at 85.58% of budget collection. And just for some perspective, in addition to that, we had individuals who could apply for deferment. Some of our landlord accounts could apply for deferment, and we have 5 of those that did. So they wouldn't be due until April 1st, as opposed to the February 1st that the rest of our accounts are expected to pay. And that's a little over $137,000. So of those larger properties, they would come in, they have till April 1st before they're late. So as of today, included in that almost 76% collection, we're at 74.03% real estate collection 68.51% personal property, 93.43% of motor vehicle, and that's the regular motor vehicles that go out in July, and 48.49% of motor vehicle supplementals. So those supplementals are the ones that are due, that went out due for February 1st. So we've collected about half of those. And just compare, it's a little bit apples to oranges, but dollar for dollar from where we were on this date last year, we're about 70,000 more than we collected last year. Just for a little bit of perspective, but it is a little bit of apples and oranges.
Sure. Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments on public health crisis effect on budget? All right, let's move on to CIP capital funding process. CIP met last night, and it was a continuation of the meetings that are essentially reviewing the submittals and asking questions of the submitting parties. It's not yet at the point of starting to construct the plan. The next steps in the CIP process is field trips coming up to look at some of the townwide assets that presenters are looking for CIP to consider replacement or upgrading of. And that process with the field trips will start this coming Saturday. There are part of the value probably of the field trips and of this planning process is in these requests for the next 5 years. There are a lot of vehicles, there are a lot of parking lots, either replacement or chip sealing or painting and repairing. There are a lot of building projects. So the planning and the fact that we didn't already have a 5-year plan in place is going to be very critical this year, in my opinion. Anyone else with comments, thoughts, questions on that?
Mike, I just wanted to point out that those are public meetings and anyone from the public can come. And I'd encourage everyone on this board to go because it's eventually going to come to us. So.
Thank you. Any other board comments on that item? Stephanie, it looks like you're thinking of commenting. There you go. Oh, you were there for a second. There it is.
Christina was referring to the, are you referring to the field trip on Saturday? So that people know about that. It's at noon, starting at the transfer station to look at some of the facilities there and autos there, and I mean, vehicles there, and then the 2 fire departments after that, so.
Yeah, and I think the information's on the agenda, but because it is a in-person meeting, we're going to be very careful about COVID protocols, particularly since we're a public function. We're going to be careful about how many people are in place and masks and all that other stuff. That's kind of how we can get away with doing some in-person meetings because we're in this sort of odd time. Matt, did I see your hand go up?
Yeah, so there's going to be a field trip. I'm not familiar with this. When would that be?
I think the agenda, it was just decided late last night and the agenda just came out this afternoon, right?
Yes, and we'd look for a new agenda with some additional details that we were discussing the COVID protocols, but we never actually put them on the agenda. It was pointed out to us by a resident, so I thank him for that. You know, masks will be required. We are limited to the number of individuals who could be present if you move inside a building. That limits the number, although it's a public meeting, it certainly puts some constraints on that. And there will be minutes published from the meeting because it is a meeting.
So the initial
agenda is posted with the details.
And then there'll be a revised
one that will have COVID protocols. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. Monitoring the current fiscal year budget. We looked at all that information last week, and I don't believe there was anything that was notable or concerning in that particular in my mind, but I'm certainly open to other people's thoughts, questions. Donna, do you have anything else you feel is concerning, or anything you want us to know about how the current fiscal year budget is going? You feeling okay with where we are year to date?
I am feeling okay with it.
Thank you. Board of Finance manual policies, etc. I am working on gathering some information from other towns to model from. I did send out some information in the correspondence email earlier today, which does not need any action tonight at all. It can be reviewed at your convenience. And I have talked with CCM a little bit on this also to try to give us some guidance. There are some great models from other towns out there that might help us as we endeavor to make the process easier and more predictable, perhaps. Any questions, comments on that? All right. Annual reports. Marissa has compiled the annual report for the previous fiscal year, and we need guidance from either Donna or Erica as to what we do with it now, now that it's compiled.
You're talking about the annual reports for the 1920 fiscal year, or the 1819, yes. Right? You were a little bit.
1920, 1819. Marissa, help me.
So it's the compilation of the report that each department writes. This is what our board did, whatever. So that's all compiled, and I just don't know where to put it.
So your board, I recall your board has to approve it, and then it goes, it's typically at your, is the budget hearing?
The annual town meeting.
Annual town meeting, which didn't happen last year, which is why you didn't have one from 1819, because we didn't have an annual town meeting. So I think the advice would probably be to approve both of them, right? Ideally, you'll have two.
They can both go to the public hearing this year.
Correct. As two separate items. I would, approve them each separately. Are you still compiling for 1920?
Yes. So, so maybe what we can do is Marissa, if Marissa shares it with the board members as a correspondence, that would give people time to look at it before the next meeting. And in the meantime, we're compiling the next fiscal year. I don't see a need to act on it tonight. It's so far behind anyway, and we can't do anything until it goes. We can't do anything else besides approve it until it goes to the hearing.
So there's, once your board approves it, it goes to the annual town meeting for the residents to approve. So you'd want, if you're still working on solicitations from the 1920, you want to push them along.
Right. Right. What I'm saying is we don't need to act so much on approving the annual report tonight. We can give the members of this board time to look at it till the next meeting. In the meantime, we're chasing the next one.
Have you received any from 1920? Or had you asked? I guess is the first question.
Well, we've had a few people reach out and we said, wait till we get this one compiled. So that we didn't have things laying over and creating confusion.
I would encourage you to send that request ASAP. So for those who haven't prepared, knowing that they do it annually, I'm guessing most of the town departments had them ready because you're ready to send off just without the request. I don't know where it's going.
Yes, we had one of the challenges was we had a lot of the zoning related areas have been compiled into one. And that for a while threw us off because it was under one heading, but we were able to disseminate which pieces of it were for the different groups. And we, Marissa was able to break it up.
So can we get a copy of the 18, maybe we already have it, I don't know, I didn't see it, 1819 annual report, and then can we schedule that for a vote for our next meeting?
Yeah, that's exactly what I just said. Yep. Okay, So we will keep this. It's a recurring old business item. We'll keep it on the agenda for the next meeting. Marissa, if you could send out that report, please, so everyone will have it to look over. Thank you. And we will get out the request immediately for the next. All right. Status of the Mike Perry alternate seat. This will be great to be able to get this off of our old business. The registrars of voters were able to establish that Mike Perry is a registered and active voter in another jurisdiction. They sent a letter to the town clerk, which the town clerk was able to accept as the required information to consider him no longer an elector in Willington and thus remove his appointment or unappoint him or whatever the proper terminology would be. And so as far as the status of his alternate seat, it is now vacant. So any questions on that before we move to new business?
Could you remind us of the time frame there, how long it's been?
A long time.
Like 10 months?
From the time he was no longer active. I don't remember exactly what meeting it was, but it was somewhere around, it was in the first few electronic meetings, I think, was the last time we saw him.
Sometime through the summer. It was determined that he registered to vote in another state in September. So for sure, since September, he's been an elector in another jurisdiction, but that didn't come to light because we didn't know where he lived. So I will say both our town clerk and both of our registrars worked diligently to try to find the information when we believed he lived out of state. But every state doesn't work like, Willington and their Connecticut and their county systems. And so we tried looking until we found a physical address that made it very difficult. And then everything snowballed from there. It was very quick once we had an address.
Erica, I'm not questioning the process and nailing it down. I understand how fraught that was. I'm questioning how long has that seat been unattended? Does anyone remember? Has it been a year? 10 months? It
was like April.
It has not been a year. I mean, it's a little bit vague, I guess, but.
Right. Technically, since Robin received notice that he was an elector in another state, is the technical time frame it became available.
Right. It was only a couple of days. It is unfortunate that we had communication with Mr. Perry after the time he was registered in the state, and he didn't just clarify that. That would have probably helped us speed this up, but that is behind us. So any other questions on this before we move to new business?
I just wanted to confirm, was he elected to the seat or was he appointed to that seat? Because I know we had a couple of different changes.
He was elected.
Elected last November.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's what made it more difficult. So the state told our town clerk that he either had to resign or we had to prove that he was an elector in another jurisdiction.
Okay,
moving on. New business.
Mike.
Yes.
A second. I didn't know when the appropriate time to break in on this.
Go ahead.
Would it be appropriate for us, for me to nominate a replacement member at this time?
Look at your agenda. It's in new business.
I will look at my agenda under new business then.
Oh, it's supposed to be. Hang on. Yes. Yeah, it's the next item. So stand. I just had to scroll my down. Okay, so that concludes old business. Now we're resuming new business. So we have discussion about appointing an appointment to fill the vacancy. When I first released the agenda, we did not even have this information available. So I ended up sending out a revised agenda a couple of hours later. So we now have a vacancy of the alternate seat, which would expire at the next municipal election, which is this coming November. We do have, as been shared in correspondence with the board members, we do have a nomination from the Republican Town Committee. And we need to decide now how to proceed. We did I believe the last time we engaged in this process might have been when Matt Clark joined us. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we heard from, I think that particular night, of course, we were meeting in person, and the word had been out for a while that that seat was available. So we heard from multiple people that night. We also heard during present to speak comments that the person that the Republican Town Committee has nominated or put forward, endorsed, I should say, is unavailable to join us tonight. So I guess I would open it up to board comments to discuss.
Peter, you were going to, Peter Tanaka, you were going to nominate, weren't you?
Should we start there? Can I nominate Brenda Abrams to replace, to fill the opening on the board as an alternate?
Of course you can.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to nominate Brenda Abrams for the alternate seat expiring November 2021. We have discussion from board members. I was hoping that Brenda was going to be here for us to talk to her. The endorsement has value from the Republican Town Committee, but I would have liked to talk to this person and kind of get a feel for her and see what her interest is.
I think Jim Bulick indicated that she was ill. Is that correct, Jim? Oh, I'm not allowed to do that. Never mind. Never mind.
I can jump in, Mike. I've seen her in person, so I know she is a person that actually, a human being that exists.
But that's a great place to start. And she's
I've spoken to her. She seems like a very nice lady, so that's my endorsement.
Okay, that's a start. That's a start. And Jim Bulick did comment during Present to Speak that she lives in Wilmington. So we've got a couple of the basic.
She does live in town, yes.
Yeah, I've met Brenda Abrams on several occasions, worked with her campaigning, had discussions with her. She's bright, intelligent, well-meaning, and I believe she ran, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff and Peter, but I believe she ran for an office just recently and missed by a couple votes. So she's known she's known to the people of Wilmington as well.
I don't, don't begrudge her not feeling well or not being able to attend, but I would love to have a chance to meet this person.
Yeah,
Christina?
I just have a concern because we haven't met her, but also we haven't seen her at any of these meetings, and we're right in the middle of budget season. So, I mean, it'd be great. I mean, if she's appointed, then she needs to start coming to the meetings, obviously. But seems like we have an issue with onboarding and getting people up to speed about the process and all of that. And we have started talking about how to fix that. So I'm just curious if anybody has any thoughts about that, about how to get her or whoever up to speed and who's going to take responsibility for that part.
Another thought I had is this came together after months and months of waiting how to resolve this. This came together in the last 24 hours. So in the view of people who often comment that the public has limited opportunities and limited time, it's fast. And I don't know how many people in the public even know that this opportunity to be on the Board of Finance exists.
I will say that it was known for a while that Mike Perry had, I don't know what the correct terminology I got to use here, because
left the building.
Yeah. So it's been out there for a while that there's been, granted it has not technically been a vacancy until technically today, but the word has been out there, and Brenda has been kind of waiting in the wings for, so to speak, for a few months.
But if she's been waiting in the wings, why hasn't she been to any of our meetings?
Well, coming to a meeting, it's a little bit, that's a little bit of an oxymoron, don't you think?
No, I mean,
well, nothing.
I think though anyone in the public should be coming. It shocks me. I don't know why it still shocks me that more people don't come to these meetings to see what's going on. And but someone who has an interest in being on the board definitely should.
That's true. Granted, this virtual process is kind of a pain in the ass.
For all of us. Agree.
Jeff, it's certainly easier than having to get in your car and go to the town hall.
I would much prefer to get in the car and go to the town hall. Much. I look forward to it.
I would prefer the meetings in person also, but that we're stuck with this current arrangement right now.
I don't really feel comfortable voting on an appointment tonight for a couple of reasons. I mean, I just like to hear what her statement is about, you know, what she would like to do on the Board of Finance, why she is interested, what her financial background is on, you know, as far as this kind of work goes. That to me seems kind of basic. I do know that when she was a candidate for another board, she also had, you know, was not able to appear for, you know, during decision-making points for whether she was going to join the board or not. And I feel like that's, given that we've already had an absenteeism issue in this spot, I'm not real comfortable with going into another one that I don't feel a little more secure about.
Any more discussion? All right, Marissa, can you call a vote on the nomination, please?
I'd like to move to table the nomination, please, and bring this up when Brenda can be here.
Well, you didn't nominate her though.
Oh, okay.
We've got a motion on the table.
I seconded it, and
yeah, hang on. Let's make sure we get our process right. I believe we can move to table during a motion, or
we can. Okay.
Am I correct?
Peter could amend his motion, or
Peter can withdraw his motion.
Peter can withdraw his motion.
Right.
Should I grab my Robert's rules and see if we can, or Erica, do you know the answer?
If Peter withdraws his motion and whoever seconded it agrees to that, you can withdraw the motion. I mean, you were on the cusp of voting, but didn't actually. So if someone had called a question, that would be different.
Peter?
Okay, I guess my question was, can we table with a motion on the floor?
No, you'd have to take care of the motion on the floor. So you'd have to vote on this motion.
Yeah.
Or, you know, he can withdraw it if their intent is not to go through with the vote.
Peter?
Essentially, if we table this, I just need to make the same motion next month, because I think that Brenda is due consideration for the position. So given that, I will withdraw my motion that we are in consideration that we're tabling it for our next meeting, and that I will be renominating her and hope that she can attend.
I'll be seconding that motion when Peter makes it, and I think that she'll make a fine Board of Finance member.
Okay. I think you need to agree to remove your second.
I already did that before Peter spoke. I now do it again after he spoke.
Okay. And I move to table new business item 1 to the next regular meeting of the Board of Finance.
Second.
Thank you, Peter. Any discussion on the tabling? Marissa, can you call the vote to table item 1 of renewed new business?
Is this technically item 4 though? Or
yes, you are absolutely correct.
Okay, just wanted to. All right, Chris.
Correct my bullets.
Okay. Christina?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Stephanie? Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Okay. Next item, use and disposition of meeting Zoom videos. I think I heard a little discussion before the meeting started, but we should address it in the meeting. The new arrangement, the town has a new Zoom account set up, which we're using tonight for the first time. And this allows Erica to be able to record the meetings on a town computer at the town office building, which eliminates a lot of things and improves the situation. So the plan that Erica and I last discussed was that she would record it and then she would be able to do the download the next day. But I see her shaking her head, which worries me.
It's a little, it worked for tonight. So what happened was we were able to use free licensing from Zoom, and then they changed their format. So the phone option with the free Zoom we were using is no longer available. They make you pay to have a phone number to call. So that forced us, because the minimum by executive order is to listen by phone. So that forced us then to purchase some Zoom licensing. So what we'll do is Mike and or Marissa, if you want it to be Marissa, if you want it to be Mike, we'll give you the information so you can log into the Zoom account that we put the meeting on. You'll be able to start the meeting and record it. And it actually records to a cloud. So then I can go into that same Zoom account and we'll put it on from this side. It doesn't need to be recorded to our physical computer, and then upload it to the YouTube channel. So there won't need to be a file transfer anymore. You just need to make sure we have the Zoom, the cloud recording, which is what we're doing tonight. So at your next, this all happened very quickly. So for your next meeting, you'll have, again, when you contact Heather for setting up a meeting, think about it as similar to requesting a room in the town office building. Now you're just requesting a Zoom account. We'll give you the login and then it'll all be recorded there. And from there, okay. Marissa, you can you can get back to it from either that cloud recording or the YouTube channel. And those go up pretty quickly. So tomorrow morning, I'll have this on the Zoom, on the YouTube channel. Okay. And I believe as of this morning, all of your previous meetings are now on YouTube.
Yes, once we established once Marissa and Heather made the connection and had the process working, over this week, we've caught up on the previous meetings that were missing. So everything going back to the beginning of Zoom, I believe which was, the beginning of Zoom, which was sometime back in the spring, we had a where we weren't operating at all, but whenever that was, yeah. I believe all of our meetings are now in there.
Correct. You were just missing 3.
Yes.
So it was not bad.
Yeah, I think everything's in there now.
Yes. I appreciate your patience as we continuously recreate this new format wheel.
Right. Any questions on the Zoom videos? Okay, next item, board email communications. We've had multiple times where I have attempted or succeeded in asking that we limit our communications so that we are not risking conducting an illegal meeting by discussions in email. I have specifically there was a recent conversation that when I was asking for agenda items that I said we cannot have discussion. Let me just read it here. So I sent an email on January 6th to all board members where I said, as we move into the new year and another exciting budget season, I'm asking that each of you provide any agenda items or topics that we should be discussing as we endeavor to make prudent decisions on how to manage our taxpayer resources. Obviously, we cannot have discussions in email. And I said, obviously, because I've said this many times already. But you can each offer ideas and we can follow up as appropriate. It's similar to asking what your availability is for a meeting. It's not a discussion unless it becomes a back and forth discussion. Then it became a discussion and I said we couldn't continue it. And then I got an email saying, well, you asked us for agenda items. Why can't we discuss it? And I literally legally could not even respond to the group to that email. That was creating an illegal meeting. I responded to that person directly and said, I can't respond to that email to the group. I have had to tighten up my commenting on that to, we will discuss this in the meeting. Legally, the board cannot do business unless it's in a meeting that's been publicly advertised and warned. I did some research. I've been talking with CCM, and I did some research on FOI cases in Connecticut. There's a very similar case in 2017 with the Darien Board of Education, and the FOI Commission declared that the Board of Education was in violation of open meeting laws simply because there was a three-step email, including the whole board, where someone made some comments, and then the chairman responded back, and then someone decided to make more comments. Just those 3 emails, they were found in violation of the FOI laws and the open meeting laws. So we need to be careful. We cannot be risking an FOI violation or conducting business outside of our warned meetings. Email communication is a convenience, and it's a means of disseminating some information, and it is appropriate for someone to reach out and say, are people available to meet this day? And you can respond with your availability. We cannot discuss topics or business back and forth. I thought I'd been clear about it, but I'm reinforcing it more now. And I will, after this meeting ends, I'll send out the email that has the exact Connecticut general statutes talking about what a meeting is, what constitutes a meeting, so everyone has it for reference. But to paraphrase, it says a meeting includes any communication by or to a quorum of a multiple member agency, whether in person or by means of electronic equipment, to discuss or act upon a matter over which the public agency has supervision, control, jurisdiction, or advisory power. So I want to reinforce that. We have to clean this up. And if there are any questions or comments, I'll take those.
So for future reference, hit reply and not reply all.
Yes, and if it's just simply answering if you're available, it doesn't matter whether you hit reply or reply all, because we're not conducting business. So it's perfectly fine to just hit reply if you like. So it's not.
Quorum is 4.
What's that?
A quorum is 4.
Yeah.
Quorum is 4 for us. And keep in mind, this does not have any effect on things such as caucuses or anything like that, but that's not happening in your official town email anyway. There are other things. That do, and I think in the actual Connecticut general statutes, it may even say that this, doesn't include like social gatherings where a quorum of people might coincidentally be attending. Stuff like that. But if you gather for purposes of any of our business or things we have purview over, it's an illegal meeting. Okay.
Mike, I just wanted to add someone told me a long time ago, and this is what I always think about. If you're trying to persuade somebody about something, or you're trying to share an opinion, you just can't on email, and that makes it simple. If you're just saying this information is attached without a commentary, that's fine. But once you start adding in, and then other people start sharing their opinions, and then you're done. So
that is true. Again, with the caveat that it doesn't become back and forth. Like if someone just sends out information to be informative, but then someone decides to reply with countering information, you're now creating a discussion.
Right.
Even if you don't express an opinion in your email, if you send information back, if you start a back and forth, you've created a conversation.
But one thing I want to clarify on reply all and that kind of thing, if you're asking for agenda items, we can all send those to, we can reply all on that, can't we? And also,
you could respond back saying, I'd like to see these things. No one else can comment on the validity of.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying for the purposes of keeping our colleagues on the board in the loop of what we're asking to be added to the agenda without comment, just say, I think we need to revisit, you know, capital reserve or something.
So I'm no legal expert, but based on what I've read so far, I think that the simple response of these are things I'd like to see added to the agenda would not constitute a meeting. If someone comments about that or counters it,
then you're in a different,
or starts agreeing to it, now you're in a whole new place. You've created a discussion.
Right. Well, because sometimes,
and if you said, these are the things I'd like to discuss in the next meeting for the following reasons, and I think everyone should vote yes, that
is conducting business. That's attempt to persuade. Yes.
I think the best opinion, and this is from many FOI meetings that I've attended, is just, you know, I've shared with Mike a tool he can use so that it's undisclosed recipients, it's going to the board. So if you hit there is really no option to hit reply all, and then either the board chair or your secretary are collecting those and then putting out an agenda to you all. And so you're replying to one source, and it takes away the inadvertent reply all and starting discussion. You think you're only talking to Mike, but you're talking to more, you know, than one person.
So,
yes, and Eric, let me just comment on that first, Matt. Erica did send me instructions on how to construct the email that way. I haven't done it as of today, but
yeah. It's just another way of, you know, I think we've all, listen, at the state level, I get things that go to, you know, 500 people, and somebody starts hitting reply all, and the next person does, and the next thing you know, I know everybody's opinion on that one topic. So you don't always even mean to hit reply all, you mean to hit reply. This just will give you the option so that you just don't make that mistake.
Okay, Matt.
The only time
Hang on, Steph. Hang on, Stephanie. Matt had his hand up.
Yeah, so there's a gentleman that works for the state of Connecticut, Commissioner of Public Education Officer for the Freedom of Information Board. He does meetings. He has one in Hartford, Plainfield, Middletown, Meriden, Woodbridge over the next month. He presents to boards like ours.
Is it Tom Hennick?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's been to Wellington many times.
Many times. We've made them available to board members in my time in this office many times. I know previous to that, he's been here, you know, Christina had set up, different boards have set up. It might be worth asking for a presentation specifically to your board. He has come and done that.
I have emailed with him.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
We have been,
hang on, Christina. Christina, hang on. I'm trying to keep you guys in order. Stephanie?
Well, it's okay. I just wanted to say that the one time where it's really helpful and faster time to reply all is when you're asking about availability. Because sometimes the schedules, you know, like if the schedules are hard to put together when we're trying to pull a special meeting. So I find it helpful when other people go, I can only do these. And I'm like, okay, what in that can I do if I'm replying after them?
We will endeavor to make this as easy as possible. And just asking everyone to please step up our game on how we manage our emails. That's all I'm asking.
Duly noted.
Okay, next item, Matt, you had asked for, you had asked to comment on grand list.
No, I commented on that in our last meeting. I talked to the assessor, and he indicated that his report will be ready for the Board of Finance at the end of January, which probably is the 30th or the 31st.
Right.
And that he does not expect any increase. He expects a flat grand list.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure because you had asked for that to be on the agenda, and I wasn't sure we had covered everything you had intended in that.
We did.
I spoke to him a couple days ago, Mike,
yeah.
and asking where we were at. The filing date is by the 31st. So I'm sure he will. They're working diligently over there. So I don't see them filing the grand list till probably next Friday, which is the 29th. And then he gets something to the Board of Selectmen. And then we will forward on information on the grand list to the Board of Finance from there.
Yeah, I did have a thought on the grand list. And our accountant indicated this as well. We have a little bit of concentration in with the FedEx, so that's about 5 or 6% of our budget. So if they left us, that would be a pretty severe blow. The other way to look at it is not as a single company or a single taxpayer, but a group of taxpayers. So we have lots of, thousands of residents and houses and things. We also have apartment complexes. So if you look at those apartment complexes in aggregate, there's probably 5 or 6 or 7 of them in Wellington. If all of them were hit with something, a problem, the University of Connecticut shut down, or it moved, or it, there was a big problem. They could all get hit with a revenue shortfall at the same time. It's a risk that we should consider.
I think I get your point, but I think one of the challenges in considering risks is likelihood. Mm-hmm. I think the likelihood of FedEx deciding to set their logistics is probably a little more plausible. Mm-hmm. Abandon that facility, although they have a huge investment in it. I think the likelihood of the apartments failing as a taxpayer is very unlikely. I don't think they've always seen growth, and there's always competition for the next investment company to buy them. So even with the COVID situation at UConn, they've actually done well because
thank you.
People are reserving apartments even that they're not using because they're afraid they won't have housing.
Right.
Okay.
So I was
this spring semester, the university is still limiting their housing capacity to 4,500, even though we have 12,000 beds. So a lot of that demand is spilling out into the community. People are literally renting their basements to college students. Not that Lisa.
I just wanted to say to Matt that if we just experienced COVID, which I think, Matt, you said last meeting was the worst financial time that you've ever experienced in your lifetime, that would be a pretty good indicator that we've weathered very well through it. Mm. And I don't think we should put up false barriers moving forward.
I'm not putting up any false barriers.
I think we need to be realistic financially, Matt. Seriously.
I'm not putting up any false barriers. I just see.
Yes, you are.
Okay, let's make sure. I want to keep this respectful.
I have no comment.
Well, that was respectful.
Okay, well, back and forth between members has a risk, and we'll let me get back on agenda. Matt, were you able to cover what you wanted on state aid in the last meeting also?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments on state aid? Erica?
I did hear today that we're not expected to see a cut in our state aid, but when I hear not expected, it's not an assurance, but that's still the word on the street. So until I hear otherwise, I think our state aid for this coming fiscal year is anticipated to stay level. But when I see it in writing and in our accounts, then I'll believe it.
Right. Steph?
Just wanted to ask if we got that, if I missed it and all the late material that came in, did we get a new jobless rate for Wellington itself? Okay.
We expect it tomorrow morning. It usually comes out the Friday after our meetings.
Okay. I think it's like 5 minutes after you end this meeting, Mike. I think that's about when it
hits. Well, I don't want to stay any longer than. Okay. Any correspondence you all got? So we're back to present to speak. Anyone who is in video first who wants to speak, wave your hand. I think I've got everyone on one screen right now. All right, I'm not seeing anybody there. Anyone else who's listening to this meeting who's not who doesn't have a camera, can you please unmute and call out your name if you'd like to speak? Okay, that's the end of present to speak. I have a couple comments in good and welfare. Usually I try to make good stuff, but in the light of what's been going on in email conversations, I wanted to comment that I've been a presenter Board of Finance for decades. And I remember all too well how I felt when board members yelled at me, made tacky jokes, demeaned the presenters, and even blatantly favored one agency over another, and were even proud of their unprofessional attitude. I vowed to myself that if I ever held public office, I would not do that. And I would discourage other people from doing it. We have a very important job to do, and we have been entrusted by our constituents to make big decisions on their behest. There is no time that this responsibility should include being demeaning, aggressive, angry, threatening, or attacking. And as I am currently entrusted to be the chairman of this board, I cannot stand for this type of behavior. I have worked very hard to try to maintain my own decorum, even when I was frustrated by things. I encourage, as I manage the talking in the meetings, for us to not get too chippy with each other or interrupt each other, but still maintain some flow, because I want a lot of ideas shared. Everyone's point of view matters. And we've done an excellent job over the past 3 years of making decisions based on hearing all the points of view. I've gone into meetings feeling really sure about something and had someone who was on the opposite thought of my idea teach me something. We do that through hearing all the points of view, respecting the people we disagree with, and operating with decorum. We should act with the dignity that befits the responsibility we have. That's how we do right by our community, when we should be proud of it. We should banish any other behavior from board business. So that's my little speech. I'll get off my soapbox. Anything else for the good of the order, Stephanie? I just want to say, under good and welfare, that I was impressed with the nugget that was in the audit presentation, that half the towns in Connecticut did not make the statutory deadline for all the reports, and that we were in like Flint. And I just appreciate Donna and so much, and the leadership of the town for getting all that done. And that helps us be better as a Board of Finance too. Yeah. But I'm just kind of proud of, that little thing just kind of jumped out at me, the way he said, this doesn't happen everywhere. So congratulations.
Donna does that every year.
Can I add on top of it, Steph, it is an achievement this year for sure, between a new software system with no in-person training, FEMA funds, the COVID relief, unprecedented billings, the work that Donna and her staff and Lori as our treasurer have done to make that happen on time is an achievement, on top of preparing budgets for both the town and the school board. So it's kudos to Donna and her staff, because they work diligently, and not to be able to do it in person makes it that much harder. And with both Phil and I constantly standing in front of her desk needing something to distract her. So thank you, Donna.
Donna's blushing.
This is why she doesn't go, why she doesn't go on camera.
Good and blushing.
Anything else for the good of the order? All right, Peter.
Move to adjourn.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All those say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone not in favor? All right, good night, everybody. Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you, Mike.